Today I'm starting another round of Kendra's Card Challenge 22. Hey, it's Beth. Welcome. Today I'm going to be using Kendra's Card Challenge 22 to start the process of making the 15 cards. I am going to be choosing my papers and cutting them down and then assembling a few cards with you today, and then we'll probably do a part 2 where I finish the rest of the 15 cards. But today I am using the Hello July kit from Not Too Shabby shop. So it has this gorgeous paper pad called Stars and Hydrangeas, and it's 12 different designs. They are double-sided. So we'll kind of do a quick flip through. So it's kind of like summery and some like red, white, and blue patterns. So you could use it, you know, it doesn't have to be 4th of July. It could just be summery. So just some fun patterns. A lot of, obviously, hydrangeas, since that is part of the title. So I will be choosing my 6 sheets of pattern paper from there. And then we also have the ephemera, Stars and Hydrangeas ephemera pack. So I will spread those out here for you in just a moment. And we have the Stars and Hydrangeas stamp set, and it's got several sentiments, you know, some hydrangeas, and then some other fun summery images. And then we also have the coordinating enamel dots. So let me spread the ephemera out for you real quick so you can kind of get an idea what's in there, and then we will kind of talk about the card challenge a little bit. If you are new to Kendra's Card Challenge while I'm spreading this out, each quarter Cards by Kendra puts together a PDF workbook that helps you take 6 6x6 sheets of pattern paper and turn them into 15 cards. And the PDF is free to download. She just asks that you sign up for a free Patreon account, and I will have the link down in the description box for you to click on, and you can go to her Patreon site, sign up for that free account, and get your download if you don't already have it. So here's just a quick overview of what is in the ephemera pack. You've got a bunch of like larger images and then some smaller accompanying images as well. When you're choosing your 6 sheets of pattern paper to cut down for Kendra's Card Challenge, I have some tips for you. 1, try to use double-sided paper. 2, try to use non-directional paper. So especially if you're just starting out, those are some really big things, because when you're looking at the cutting guides that she gives you the scissors are kind of like the starting point, like where to cut through, and then from there you would just kind of look for the next, like within the sections that creates, you would look for the next line that goes all the way through. And she gives you numbers which coordinate with the sketches that they go with, and then she gives you arrows which tell you the direction that they're going on the card. So most of the time the arrows, like, it works out. So in this case, all of the arrows are pointing up. You have one that's kind of pointing at a diagonal, so maybe it doesn't matter. And this one, if you look at cutting guide B, most of your arrows are pointing up or at a diagonal, but then you have these two, this little strip right here that's cut at a diagonal, they're going sideways. So if you're using a directional paper, sometimes you're going to have, like, you may have one piece that's, when you put it on the card, it's maybe not going the right direction. Sometimes it's small enough that it may not make a difference. Like this may not make a difference depending on what your pattern is. But if you are using a directional pattern, then I suggest, if you are using a double-sided paper, then usually you can switch to the B side, which tends to be non-directional. It's more of either a solid type pattern or at least a non-directional pattern. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're using the cutting guide, because for 98% of the time you can make the directions work, but I always end up with like one piece that the directions are off. So, you know, most of the time I'm using double-sided paper, so I can always just turn it over if I'm using directional paper and it doesn't work out. So I just wanted to throw that out there at the very beginning. I have picked 6 sheets from the pattern paper, and I am going for more of the summer vibe, not so much the red, white, and blue. So like there are some that are still red, white, and blue, but it's a very soft red, almost a pinkish red. I mean, if you think of hydrangeas, they're usually pink or blue. So it is more of a pinkish red. So I'm kind of leaning that way. If you look at the back sides, there are some patterns that I'm using like both sides of, but then the back side of a couple of these are very, you know, patriotic, red, white, and blue for the USA. So I have my patterns chosen. So the next thing that I do is I look at the cutting guides and think about the size of the patterns on the paper versus the size of the pieces on the cutting guide. So like cutting guides A, cutting guide B, and C and D, they really have like some smaller pieces. Like I would say B and C maybe have the smallest. So I would look at my papers and say, okay, I probably would not do this pattern with the larger hydrangeas for B and C. Maybe not any of these with the florals. Like I would probably do maybe the more solids for B and C, and then A, let's say, like they're not too bad. I might be able to get away with this because you want to think about the size of your images and how they're going to show up in the pieces. Like, so if you have a really like thin strip, like a 1-inch strip, you know, are you going to be able to tell that it's a hydrangea? In this case, yes, you would be able to see enough of the flower to get the idea. But there are times where when you're looking at some of these smaller triangles, like you're not going to, you wouldn't really get the full effect of the hydrangea. So I would say cutting guide A. I will just say cutting guide B. I don't know that it really matters. C. D also, I think, needs to be kind of a smaller pattern where you would at least know what it is. So I'm going to go with a wood grain for now. And then E and F are a little bit larger. So I think I can get by, I think we will do E and F. So that is how I start. And then once I have that game planned kind of in mind, I turn to the very last page of the PDF. And I will kind of order my papers here so that I can kind of see them all. A, B, C, D, E, F. And then there's a chart here that tells you which cutting guides, like which papers show up together on which sketches. So I think all of these like look great together. If you're using a collection or a pack of paper, most of the time the patterns are going to work well together. What I want to avoid is just having a card that has maybe these two patterns, like the two kind of glitter-ish patterns, like in the white wood grain. Like I don't want a card that just has maybe these 3 patterns. I want to make sure that each card has a floral on it somewhere. So I'm going to reference this guide, and I'm going to look at like card 1, let's see, has A and B, perfect. Card 2, A and B. Card 3 has A and F. Okay, that's okay. It's two floral patterns. Card number 4 has A, B, C, and D. So at least I do have one pattern. Let's look at sketch 4 like which is the predominant pattern on sketch 4. So A. So this would be kind of the predominant pattern. So I think that would be okay. Sketch 5 is C and D. Okay, so now I have these two together, which I don't really love. And then 6 and 7 are the same way. It would just be those. So with that in mind, I might switch out let's move these around. What if we did no, but then we would still have A and B. So I still need a floral. So I might have to switch out so if we look at okay, so let's try this. And it doesn't always have to be like this in-depth or scientific. Just because I've chose 3 kind of very plain patterns and 3 busy floral patterns, I want to make sure that they're mixed well on the cards. I do tend to use this grid on the back, but sometimes it's not as hard, depending on the patterns that I choose. So, okay, so looking at this one, 1 is A and B, great. 2 is A and B. 3 is A and F. 4 is A, B, C, D. 5 is C and D. So maybe we switch those 2. So then that works. 6, 7 are both C and D. 8 is C, D, and E. Fine. 9, A, B, C. 10, D and E. 11, B, C, D, E. Perfect. 12, B, C, E, F. That works. 13 is B and F. Okay, so that one would be a little plain. But I could probably bring in some cardstock, and then maybe I could always flip to the back side. I keep forgetting, follow my own tip, right? I can flip to the B side if I need to. So we might do that for 13. 14 would be E and F, and 15 would just be F, but it's a small strip. So I'm okay with that. So this is what I'm going to go with for my cutting guide. A, B, C, D, E, and F. So that is kind of how I choose my papers. Again, sometimes it's easier than that. Sometimes it's hard. It just kind of depends on the patterns that you choose. So just kind of keep that in mind. But again, my 2 biggest tips for when choosing your pattern papers, if you can, go non-directional, or at least have double-sided papers. Because then if you are directional, you can use the B side. Those are kind of my 2 biggest tips. So with that being said, I am going to jump into using the cutting guides to cut these down. And then, like I said, we will assemble a couple of cards together today. Starting off with cutting guide A, I'm going to start where the scissors mark is notated and cut that line all the way through the paper. And then I'm going to go in that right hand section and continue to look for the next line that goes all the way through the section. So I'm kind of pointing out as I go which areas I'm working on. And then I'm laying my paper out in the order that it is on the cutting guide. And this will help me in the next step when I put all the pieces for each card into individual baggies. This is, I guess, one of the other biggest tips I can give you when you're working with Kendra's card challenges is to stay organized. So whatever that means for you. I have 15 numbered baggies that I put all of the pieces into, so you can see here. So I'm pulling out the baggie for number 1, putting all the pieces that are marked number 1 from the cutting guide into that baggie, and so on. And I do this with all 6 of the cutting guides. You can see my baggies are nothing special. They are kind of cycled bags from other projects. And I've also used envelopes. You can use whatever works best for you. If you have the space on your desk, you can have numbered piles if that works for you. Just kind of figure out your system, but keep all the pieces for each card together somehow, because it'll make it so much easier when you go to the step of assembling the cards. So cutting guide B, again, I started with the scissor mark, and then again I'm working through each section and cutting, going for the easiest line that cuts all the way through. If you've made it to this point, you may not need it or care, but I do have timestamps on the video, so if you don't care about the cutting guide, you can skip to the card assembly, or if you are looking for specific help on a specific card, I will have those kind of marked in the timestamps as well, like chapters, so you can kind of skip around as you need. You don't have to watch the cutting guide if you don't need the help. But there are a lot of people who, especially if it's your first time, are intimidated by cutting down all 6 sheets at one time. So this is just kind of a way to kind of show you how I do it, give you some tips, and then kind of let you know that it's doable. Like, you can totally do this. So going through for this one again and putting my pieces in, and I lost that piece for I think it was card 2, and for some reason it was on the paper, but I kept having my bag in the way and I couldn't see it. Along with the cutting guides and card sketches in the PDF workbook, there's also some other information and helpful tips to help you work through the challenge. There is a supply list to kind of let you know what else you need in addition to just those 6x6 sheets of pattern paper. Cutting guide C now is where we are, starting again with the scissors and then going to work my way through. You also have opportunities to win prizes, and one of those is through uploading a photo of all 15 cards from the current card challenge. This one runs May, June, July of 2026. And on the very first page of the PDF, there are 3 QR codes that take you to the monthly InLinkz party, and that is where you would just upload your photo, and then, like I said, you would have a chance to win prize, and you can do 1 photo per month of the quarter, like a different set of cards each month. So for this cube triangle, I just lined up the corners of the square on my trimmer at a diagonal, and then put my blade kind of down in the middle of that square and then went up and down. For these tiny little triangles, it's just easier to use my scissors. And then for the last section here on cutting guide C, it's not a triangle, it's kind of but you are cutting at an angle, and so I just used my ruler to measure up 1 1/4 inches from the bottom left and down from the top right, and then where those marks are, I'm just going to line those up on my trimmer guide and then slice right through. So I'm pointed to cutting guide D, but I'm actually on C. But I will do the same thing once I get to cutting guide D, because it's the same measurements. And I knew it was 1 1/4 inches because of the measurements that were on the cutting guide So you have like the measurements for each individual piece. If you want to make one sketch at a time and not necessarily cut down all 6 sheets of paper at the same time, there are measurements on each individual sketch, so you can, you know, just cut down what you need for certain cards as well. Now I'm on cutting guide D, starting at the scissor mark. So this one is a little bit different because it does have a circle shape. So I'm going to work through a few of those strips and cutting them down. And when I get to the circle, I actually have a circle punch that will work. So when she gives you a circle shape, you can use a punch, a die, you can trace something that size, the shape of a circle, and then hand cut it, or just leave it square if you really don't have a good way of getting a circle. So I have a 1-inch circle punch, and it fit. Sometimes, depending on how ungenerous my cuts have been or generous my cuts have been, I may have to go down a size on the circles when it's, you know, when you just have that strip or that square that you're cutting. And I did go ahead and cut the circle first just so I had something to hold on to, and then I will cut the rest of the smaller strips out of this piece. Then I will move to the top half of cutting guide D and again work my way through. Anytime Kendra gives you specific shapes, whether you know it's in the cutting guides or on the card sketches themselves, you have some liberty. Like again, if you really can't get a circle, leave it as square. It'll work just fine. And then on the sketches themselves, you know, for embellishments or focal points, she may have a shape. If it's not part of the cutting guide, then you can use whatever shape you want. Instead of a circle, you can use an oval or a rectangle or a square, and so on. Or you could bring in a big piece of ephemera instead, depending. So you do have some liberty. You just need to make the challenge work for you and work with what you have. Also, in the PDF workbook, there are some links that you can use to go to Kendra's Patreon webpage, and that is kind of a community area. So if you have questions or you want to submit photos, just, you know, to share a single card or, you know, for inspiration, that is one place that you can kind of have community, talk to other people that are playing along with the challenge and get some inspiration. And then also there is a link to her Facebook group page, and you can do the same thing. You know, upload photos of individual sketches or ask questions, chat with everyone. So both of those are great places, great resources for inspiration and additional help if you need it. So cutting guides E and F are pretty simple compared to the first 4. We have some bigger pieces and longer strips, so these two go pretty quick. I start with the scissor mark on each of them and then just look for the next line that I can cut all the way through. And just like that, E was done. I talked about, you know, opportunities for prizes, and those prizes would not be possible without the help of our sponsors. So on the very back page of the PDF, there is a list of all of our prize sponsors who have donated prizes for this quarter's challenge, and we thank them and appreciate them and all they do. A lot of them have been with the card challenges for a while and are continued supporters, so we always appreciate that. Cutting guide F, our final cutting guide, started with the scissors and am working my way through. I had to decide which way I wanted the wood grain to go. Not that it really matters, but I opted to have the slats kind of go vertical. One last thing I want to talk about within the PDF is on that last page. There is information about Patreon membership levels. So to obtain the PDF workbook, you do have to sign up with a free Patreon account. And if you would like to support Kendra further in all of her endeavors, there are some really great benefits that come along with that and a lot of different tiers. So you can check out that chart on the last page if you would like to support her further. So our first sketch that we are doing today is one that I have heard people are struggling with. So I wanted to go ahead and cover that one. That is sketch 9. So I have done this one a couple ways now, and what I have found to be the easiest is I have my panel, which is 3 3/4 by 5, and it's just white cardstock, and I measure 1 inch in from the left hand side, and that is the width of the strip of paper A. And then I kind of like dry fit, kind of figure out what order these pieces go in. You know, they are labeled on the cutting guide, but trying to remember which pattern was which cutting guide. And then I kind of decide to turn some to the B side and then switch things around so that I have the blue pattern, the blue glittery pattern, kind of alternating with floral patterns. So then what I'm going to do once I have my order down, I'm going to go ahead and add just tape runner adhesive to that whole section on the right hand side, and I'm adding quite a bit just to make sure that all of the strips will touch quite a bit of the adhesive. And then I'm going to lay each strip down. I'm going to start with the middle, and I end up moving it because it's not really in the middle. I'm not measuring, I'm just eyeballing, but I make sure that the bottom left tip and the top right tip of that strip lines up with either the pencil line that I've made or the right hand edge of that cardstock piece. And that will ensure that the strip goes all the way across and that the vertical strip that I'm going to put on the left will cover the left hand side of those strips. Does that make sense? This is, I think, one of the easiest ways that I found. It does require some planning, you know, because you have to kind of mark, and then you just come in and you trim off the overhang from the right hand side. And I didn't end up needing much of those two kind of triangular pieces that I had. Those were just to kind of cover the blank area that the strips didn't cover. So now I can put this strip down on the left side, but I decided I wanted to pop it up a little bit since it is going to be kind of overlapping the edge of those diagonal strips. I want it to be kind of level all the way across, so I just used a piece of white cardstock, and then we'll glue that down and it'll kind of sit a little more flush, or at least won't be kind of mounded, or you won't know that it's overlapping those strips on the right hand side. And then I'm going to take this panel and add it to a card mat, and my card mat is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. On the card sketches, Kendra does give you matting layers for things. She's got the individual measurements on there. If you have white, gray, or black pieces on the card sketches, they usually do not, or they will not have a paper letter identifier on it. Those are your choice, and they are not necessarily required. So in this case, it was a white layer that she had for the matting layer. I brought in a piece of green cardstock. For the circle and mat that she has on the card sketch, I'm actually going to use a piece of ephemera from the ephemera pack. And again, I had mentioned that when she gives you shapes, you do have some leeway. Basically, you have leeway on all the cards. You just need to make sure that if someone is looking at your card, they can tell which sketch it goes with. So you can't change it up so much that it's, you know, not identifiable as one of the sketches in the challenge. But you do have some freedom. You can move things around, change some shapes, change the orientation of your cards. You know, again, you can change it up a little bit to make it work, but you still need to be able to identify it as a specific sketch within the challenge. So I have an ephemera piece picked out here, and then I'm using the sentiment from the stamp set that says "Celebrate Today." I thought that's just kind of a, I mean, that could really be used in a lot of ways. I am actually going to stamp "Happy Birthday." On the inside, I have the Ultimate Sentiments stamp set. It's the birthday stamp set from Not Too Shabby as well, and I will use the Happy Birthday sentiment. But first I am going to add a few of the enamel dots kind of scattered around just to bring in a little bit more of the red. And then I'm going to pull out my Misty stamp positioner. When I'm stamping on the inside of the card or directly onto the card base, I do like to pull out the Misty stamp positioner just because make sure I get a nice clean image and then I don't have to cover up any oopsies. So we'll make sure my stamp is on there straight, and then I will stamp it twice just to make sure that it is nice and dark. And I don't always stamp. I know a question I get a lot is, do you stamp sentiments on the inside? I don't always. It depends on what the sentiment on the outside says. If it's not clear that it's birthday or a certain theme, then I will stamp on the inside. My next sketch is sketch 14. So this one has a lot of little pieces to it as well. And I'm going to kind of take my card base and set the pieces out on it, kind of dry fit, figure out placement, and then what I want to do for the rest of the pieces. I decide, so there's two gray pieces, two gray areas there shown on that sketch, and again, gray is kind of free choice. It does not come from one of the cutting guides. So she actually suggests in embossed cardstock pieces, but I decide to go ahead and go with some more pattern paper. So I just pulled out another sheet of the pattern paper from the pad and am using the measurements on the sketch to cut down these extra pieces. And I just wanted some more of the color. So I dry fit them on the card base, just make sure I have all the pieces that I need. And then I am going to do a card mat, again using that green just to kind of contrast with all the lighter colors. And this time I go with a 4 by 5 1/4 inch mat. And again, we'll kind of dry fit all the pieces, figure out the spacing before I start gluing things down. And as far as spacing, I am trying to pay more attention to the spacing on the outer edge, like the border of between the cardstock edge and all of the pieces. So I'm paying more attention to the border on like the outer edges of these strips that I'm putting down. And the reason why is because when you are making the card, you can always add something to the middle of the card to kind of cover any weird spaces or spacing issues that you might have. But then, you know, the outer part of the card, the borders, the edges are still usually seen. So I just want to make sure that the outer borders look nice and clean, even though the inside borders might be a little whiter than that. And you can see that here. So these top two strips, the amount of spacing between the strips and the outer edge of the mat is a lot smaller than that space between the two pieces of the pattern paper. And you'll see here, like once I put my focal point on, you can't even really see it. So now that I have all those pieces down, I am going to add this to my card base, and then we'll pick out some embellishments. So on the sketch, she shows a circle and a matting layer for the circle. I'm going to use some of the pretty ephemera again. I decide to go with the high tops with the hydrangeas in the top, and then I'm bringing in some of the green cardstock. I die cut a circle that fit behind the shoes, and then I also use some white cardstock to die cut a doily. It's just a doily die from my stash. I'm going to use that Celebrate Today sentiment again. And then I'm going to mat that sentiment on some of the green cardstock. And I'm just going to use the scrap around where I die cut the circle, not measuring. I'm just using the sentiment as a guide to cut down the size that I need. And then I'm going to overlap the sentiment piece a little bit, or the focal point piece a little bit with the sentiment. So now that I have all that figured out, I can go ahead and glue everything down. And once I get the doily on, like, you don't really see, you don't notice, I mean, you will now because I'm going to point it out, but you wouldn't really notice the difference in the spacing between the strips versus the outer border. The doily helps take away from that. So that is why I focused on the outer border and not necessarily the spacing between the pieces on the inner part of the card. And then I will add my sentiment on, and then I do bring in some more of the enamel dots just to add a little something extra. I go with the red again, but this time I go with like some varied sizes. This time I'm leaving the inside blank so I can use the card for, you know, just about anything. And then this one's complete as well. Hope you guys enjoyed. Please check out the links below for the card challenge information and the Not Too Shabby products. Thank you to Not Too Shabby for being a continued sponsor, and thank you all for your time today, and I hope you all have a very crafty day.